Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm testing out the 8-core GPU base model 999 MacBook Air with 256 gigabytes RAM. First thing we're testing is GTA 5, which runs at 30 frames per second. And I thought that this was one of the first games I tested. This was like, okay, this is the M4 Air performance. But it turns out that there's a VSync setting that was adjusted that I'm not exactly sure if Grand Theft Auto kind of auto detects or not, but in there it was set to half, which means it sets to 30 frames per second. If it was on, it would be 60 frames per second, and off lets it be totally uncapped. So after turning that off, we rerun the bench, and to my surprise, because I'm coming from an M1 Max, I wasn't expecting like this good of a performance. You're getting anywhere from 70 to 90 frames per second in Grand Theft Auto, at least on this benchmark. Now, when it comes to gameplay, something that MacBooks have issues with on macOS, and if you are wondering, this is running on crossovers. You can also run Parallels to run this, but it's how you run Windows games on Mac. There is a issue with shaders compilation because it does not support shader compilation, I guess is the way to phrase it. So things will pop up and you'll get some stutter and lag in most games you play in Windows. Some is worse than others. This one wasn't particularly bad, but here, surprisingly, we're getting around 120 frames per second with some dips, but it looked really good when I was playing, and it's just something to consider that these devices are really capable of playing. And one thing I'll also mention is in terms of this YouTube video, people ask me about thermals all the time. There was only one instance when I was playing where I noticed that the keyboard was hot, and that was Witcher 3. With that being said, I don't particularly know. I guess could be better in my methodology testing, but I think the best way to do this is just show people, hey, here's the raw gameplay footage. If you notice stutters or frames per second, this is recorded in QuickTime, which has the least amount of impact on performance compared to OBS. So use the YouTube video chapters. I'll mark them down which games show the gameplay of which, so you can decide for yourself if there is a throttle issue. Of course, I don't have, I guess I could have shown or installed some software to show temperatures. Wasn't particularly doing that, but for now I'll just show gameplay footage, and I'll just have commentary similar to other videos I made in the past, commentary in the beginning and then raw gameplay footage after. Enjoy.
Lightning won't strike. It's cumulonimbus computing. You're in the clouds now. Weasel next week.
A local woman found love from government spying.
Apocalypse news.
Scientists say the asteroid known as QC7 will be dangerously close to Earth next week. If a collision occurs, 1.5-mile wide space rock would cause catastrophic damage and most certainly wipe out our species. Space rocks have tried to annihilate mankind. 50,000 years ago, an asteroid
Are we having fun now?
after a man foolishly listened to his woman and ate a piece of forbidden fruit. Scientists warn the asteroid will pass 20 million miles from Earth, which they say is really, really close.
Jeanette Adams says she is so glad the government has been collecting phone records and reading citizens' email and text messages. If it hadn't been for that, she would still be single. FIB agent Kenny Bryan contacted her out of the blue after reading her private email and postings on Life Invader. The couple are now engaged. Officials point to these kinds of heartwarming stories in defense of the much-publicized surveillance program.
This was Weasel News.
From the home of creeps, cults, and rock and roll, this is Vinewood Boulevard Radio.
So Cyberpunk also has a benchmark tool. Here we were getting around 40 frames per second. I'll say here that in my testing, I feel like sometimes you have to restart things to get the full configuration changed, and I did that a couple of times. I turned ray tracing on and off, and I think the best tests here are showcased at the end where it tells you what the settings were. Now, there, of course, is the metal frames per second blocking the view. But that being said, I think the game works best on low or Steam Deck settings. Here we can see frame generation is covered, but I believe it's on. And FSR turned on, ray tracing not enabled on that particular test. And then we'll go into some gameplay footage So I do test it again, and suffice to say, it didn't get too much difference in the benchmarks, but I do end up running it on low when I go to gameplay footage. So here in the gameplay footage, I think it wasn't as smooth as I'd like. I like playing games at either 30 frames per second, but it's like smooth. Something about the controls, I haven't played this in Windows in a while, but something seemed off with the controls and the mouse and stuff of that nature. So something to keep in mind, I've complained about this when playing Dota 2, is that in Mac version, Mac OS, even running Windows versions of games, sometimes I think maybe the mouse acceleration makes it different than the Windows experience. But if you are okay with 40 frames per second, something about it just doesn't seem like it's 40 frames per second. It seems kind of off. So with that in mind, this is the footage and the gameplay of Cyberpunk. So here's Sims. Unfortunately, the QuickTime recording didn't get the audio here, so when you watch the gameplay footage, you won't hear any of the Sims language. But with that being said, I think the game ran pretty well, running at full Retina resolution, almost above the frame rates of 60 frames per second, which is the refresh rate of this particular device. MacBook Airs run at 60 hertz, while the MacBook Pros with Pro Motion could get up to 120 hertz. With that being said, everything was maxed out, good performance. I didn't notice any particular stutters or lag. So if you're into Sims, especially with such a great device, could be good for college and taking around in the backpack. Definitely a good experience when playing Sims. Random Sims toys.
Have you seen the? Oh wait, I think I already told you, where they like, what do you call it? Remix songs with sim language.
Lobo, get a toy. Oh.
Am I in a bougie bar shop? What's going on there?
Jessene Klonkas Rabana.
Floopy.
Dilbar.
Oh, and
Okay, that's
Bora.
Burpa.
We're gonna miss the
Sharky
Sims.
Gelma.
Isaac.
Gelbator.
Stabby. Weebo.
Alright, that's it. Time to install the game. So Red Dead Redemption 2, this was run with these settings, everything set to low. Again, sometimes when you change settings, it tells you to restart. I'm not particularly sure if I did that or not, but when we get into the gameplay, it actually runs, in my opinion, fairly well. I think some issues I've seen running on crossovers is full screen or windowed, full screen borderless. When you change the resolution, doesn't actually change it. But here we could see running at 1470 by 918, which is half the Retina resolution. So there is a way in crossovers, if you want to run most games at full resolution, you turn on Retina mode, and then it allows you to have the option on the games to do that. But I think that it's basically like running 50% scaling. But I think that on the M4, I wouldn't recommend that, and I would just run it at kind of this resolution. That being said, this actually performs, in my opinion, similar to my M1 Max. I think that changing some of the settings sometimes doesn't change the GPU performance. So going from ultra to low kind of it ends up being the same, at least on the M1 Max. But here I run it on low and we get around 40 frames per second, up to 50 sometimes. Definitely seems, in my opinion, like a smoother gameplay than Cyberpunk, even though it's the same FPS technically. But yeah, just something to consider. Enjoy the gameplay.
I'm an innocent man! Hey, enough out of you!
Okay, boy. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. Who goes there?
It's me, Arthur.
Look who's back!
I think I'm gonna turn in.
So Spider-Man is a game I've tested pretty much every iteration of MacBooks I get, from M1, M2, M3, and now the M4. Definitely not as great as playing on the M1 Max, so I think this one scales with the GPU better on the M1 Max. Now there are some games, as you've seen, where the M4 is definitely capable, which I think it's because the single core and multi-core is faster. Whereas on the M1 Max, it drags down, even though it has more GPU cores, they're not fully utilized and bottlenecked by the CPU of the M1 Max. So, with that being said, I think if you're going for an entry level MacBook, this is definitely a good device to have. Now, keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, that the SSD holds it back, especially when trying to run a bunch of games. Even if you do use an external drive, you want to get a fast one. And there's an issue where Witcher 3 and Marvel Rivals wouldn't run on the external. So keep that in mind when deciding which configuration to get. But yeah, I think Spider-Man runs particularly well. Even if you don't get 60 frames per second, it still has FSR 3.1 frame generation. So that really helps in boosting the performance to an acceptable gameplay. Yeah, not much else to say. I think if I had to go with a device, though, I've heard and seen that the M4 Pros on the MacBook Pros run really well. I wish that they would release a version of MacBook Air where it has the Pro version, even though it might get really hot. I feel like it would still be a better experience than M4s. Like maybe the M5 Pro can run on MacBook Airs, and that would be really cool. So as I pointed out, Marvel Rivals, it actually has to compile shaders every time it runs on crossovers, which I'm not exactly sure how to fix that. But once it finishes, it boots up, but then I got this error here with the anti-cheat not running. This was able to be solved by putting it on from external drive to the internal drive. Unfortunately, the QuickTime recording didn't save for some reason. Sometimes it happens. I'm not exactly sure why on Mac OS. But suffice to say, everything was put to, I put it to medium. And then let me see what else I did here. I put it to medium, and I think I turned frame generation on in the beginning. And so here I'm just in the training module, and we are, in my opinion, in this particular game, I think that the mouse tracks weird. I'm not sure if it's mouse acceleration or I'm on a Bluetooth mouse. But either way, I just kind of showcase some of the stuff here. So this one does suffer, as you saw there, from micro stutters, which is shaders not loading. Apparently this, is apparent in Overwatch 2 if you play that game as well. And the recommendation is to load up some shaders by joining training mode, and then, then when playing competitively works better. But yeah, just something to consider. If you guys want to play this game, it definitely runs 40 to 60 frames per second, but you have that stutter, which is apparent with some games. It wouldn't even matter if you went to M4 Pro or M4 Max. It just happens in Mac gaming, and that's just a consequence. And if, obviously, people always have trade-offs, and I would personally recommend getting a Zephyrus G14. I think they're sleek devices that are similar build quality to MacBooks if you wanted to game or gaming was a high priority. But people do prefer MacBooks, and I think so far what I'm showcasing is the M4 MacBook Air base model with 8-core GPUs runs games fairly well, especially considering this is crossovers and it's emulating or has a Windows layer translation.
I am too good at this.
Double KO! That's 3!
I never miss. Move all you want. I'll just aim where you were.
Double KO!
You're too loud.
That's 3! Wow, 4 in a row!
Heads up, bad guys. Yeah, I earned that one.
Double KO! That's 3! Wow, 4 in a row!
Another one for the good guys.
Double KO! That's 3!
It's too easy when you never miss.
Wow, 4 in a row! 5! That's amazing!
So Armored Core, I've tested on the M1 Max. Here we're seeing the settings, making sure to turn VSync off, trying to get unlimited frame rates. But typically I'm testing this in the training sortie mode, and when you run real missions, it actually lags a little bit, even on the M1 Max. But here we get around 45, around 45 frames per second. And then when we turn the trainer AC unit on, we start getting the shader, micro stutters, compilation, stuff of that nature, which actually didn't go away as I kept battling the unit. So I do later on test out trying to get better performance by setting things lower, and I think the only thing that really helped is setting the graphics. Well, like I mentioned before, in crossovers, it seems to be an issue with borderless window or full screen, where it doesn't actually change the resolution according to the metal graphics renderer. It stays at 1400 by whatever. even though I set it down to like 1280. And the only way to get it down is to go to Windows mode. So for those of you who game on Macs and are looking for better performance and want to turn things down, just try going to Windows mode, and you can get a little bit of frame boost bump. So Witcher 3 had issues running off the external, as I mentioned, but at ultra settings, what you're seeing here runs at 20 frames per second, which I think is unplayable. But then as we go to the graphics, there are the settings to preset to set it to low. So we take things down from ultra low because I don't think people want to play on people want to play at 20 frames per second. I think that the way you apply it, I'm guessing just because the graphics jump up, is you get to 35, 30-ish frames per second on medium, and then it bumps up again once you go to low. And of course, as I mentioned, in Armored Core, getting the resolution lower only works on Windows mode. I did notice a lot of stuttering here going on, so keep that in mind. If you are deciding to get this device primarily for gaming, this is something that happens with all particular games. And I think from what I've seen online, I have an M4 Pro, but it's a work device. I'm not going to test games on it. But I've seen that because the CPU multi-core is better and the graphics cores is better, you still get stuttering, but it's not as prominent as, in my opinion, I'm seeing here with the M4 MacBook Air. And then also keep in mind, this is a fanless device. So as I've been testing, that could also be leading to the issues. And lastly, I'll say with the devices I tested, it was Spider-Man, Witcher, and Marvel Rivals that were running internally, and then the external device was on all the other games. So I don't think that impacts performance, in my opinion. I think that just impacts load times, but it could possibly impact the stuttering. because obviously it has to read the shaders and then render it on screen. So I mentioned this just to say that the base model has 256 gigabytes of RAM, and I literally couldn't install a lot of games. I had to resort to using an external hard drive. So keep that in mind. I mean, most games that I tested ran, but there are some use cases where they don't run. So if you want the best compatibility, technically, you'd have to upgrade your SSD.
You seek...
Yes.
No. This...
Not a...
Come on.
So, a griffin this close to the village? Strange.
My thoughts exactly. In the forest or the mountains, sure, but here? Near the main road.
Maybe it's the war. Corpses everywhere, the stench of blood, burnt flesh. Drives monsters crazy sometimes.
Men, too. We need to watch ourselves in White Orchard. And we should leave as soon as we learn anything.
My gran told me about Smith's boy. Lad went missing.
Take it easy.
Coke-Lagger witchman that was hunting nearby started poking him, asking. When he started twisting and squirming, so wham bam, they knocked his head off.
Aye, so it were. Except it was some drowner that had sapped on the kid. Which had got to do with it.
So the last gameplay I'll showcase here is Heartstone. For some reason, it was really loud. This is the first time playing the game. I didn't have metal FPS running, but it seemed to run smooth. This was a request from someone to play it. And last, the video ends with WoW, but my friends aren't giving me their WoW count details to test it out, but you need to pay for WoW Classic, and that's why I've shown before WoW Regular, because you could play up to level 20. But with that being said, I think WoW Classic would probably run the same. I need to look if they actually converted that to be a metal optimized game, but I'd imagine it'd be the same. So here's just Heartstone for the end of the video, and then technically it ends on WoW. But yeah, M4 MacBook Air, pretty good device in my opinion. Let me know what questions you have and if you're considering picking up this device. Peace.
I don't have enough mana.
Job's done. Don't mess with Tusk. Tuzdingo! Yes!
One shot, one kill.
Handle it!
Give it a shot.
Job's done.
Handle it!
Give it a shot.
No, take can. Mind if I roll
Give that minion a turn to get ready.
Give it a shot.
Job's done. Give that minion a turn to get ready.
I've got a huge gun.
Give it a shot.